welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter or X. It doesn't really matter what it's called. There's still a Twitter logo here on StreamYard, so I'm going to keep on calling it that for no other reason than that's the first thing I look up and see. John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California, or I should say back in Los Angeles, California. And we've got my co-host, Matt Ibby Ibanez, holding it down in New Jersey. Ibby, we got a lot of stuff. Speaking of, we got a fantastic guest who's going to join us, not only to talk about the QBC and kind of put a wrap on that for the year, but also talk about all the stuff that is going on with the winter meetings and the Rule 5 draft and the hot stove and Juan Soto and the fact that Christopher Mad Dog Russo continues to put his foot in his mouth in ways that I didn't even think were absolutely possible at this point. Yeah, I thought he did all the dumb stuff he was ever going to do from like 1990 to like 2001, but I guess I was wrong. Anyway, Ibby, there's a lot of stuff to do and not that much time really to do it. So how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. It was a fantastic weekend, and we'll get into all of that with our guest for the episode. It was an incredible time. It really was, and I can't wait to, like you said, to put a bow on all of that because it was my first time at the QBC, full-scale QBC. Had a incredible time, and you did a fantastic job hosting and everything. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But yeah, it's I'm glad that we're going live, and there's finally some inklings of things happening, at least across baseball. Our Mets are still kind of waiting in the weeds a little bit, if you will. There's some stuff that we will talk about when it comes to our Mets, but other happenings may break potentially during this show. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk some baseball.
Yeah, and shout out to everybody who was at the QBC. A lot of people in the comments, Chris and Patty and Jeff and more. I'm leaving out people. A lot of people from just Mets Twitter. Andy, Angry Albanian, was there. So many folks, and it's really great to see those people, and in some cases meet those people. I never met a few of them, in person, so that was awesome. And then, I should bring this up. Talking Mets with Rob is here, saying, "What's up, guys?"
What up, Rob?
And I'm actually pulling double duty today. I'm going to pop over on Rob's show after we're done with this one, about an hour later, and do some more Mets stuff. He does a lot of hot stove conversations, as he should, as we all should this time of year. So I'm going to pop over there and talk about some more Mets hot stove with Rob coming up in just a little bit. Keith Blacknick in the comments saying, "I'm so tired." And what a better intro. You know what? What a better intro than to just turn things over to Media Goon himself, Keith Blacknick. Of course, the man behind the curtain at the QBC, working hard. And Keith, I know you have an unbelievable team that works with you, making that thing possible. But I understand why you're tired, because I'm tired, and I only had to be there for one full day, not the 3 full days you put in at the venue, plus all the other time that you spent pretty much the entire year getting the QBC ready. But I think I can speak for all Met fans when I say it's absolutely fantastic, and we're happy that you do it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate that you guys are part of the QBC family now too. John, you've been doing it for a few years, and we have Ibby since Howie Rose, and now he got to experience his first full-time QBC. And we just pressured him a little bit to actually jump onto the panel with you. And I think he did a great job. So let's give Ibby a little round of applause for his first QBC.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I totally agree. And we got some comments coming in, so I do want to acknowledge them real quick. First of all, we got, hey, the legends, Keith, John, and Ibby. Keith joins the show officially and automatically takes top billing, which is totally fine in the eyes of Chris Ferraro. I'm just kidding. Jeff Cohen saying, "Great time, Keith. Your team did a great job." And Chris followed up by saying the QBC was incredible. And it is every year. And look, we're going to talk hot stove. We're going to talk about the Mets and Severino and all the stuff that has happened in the last week since we recorded. And I wasn't even here for the last episode. Ibby was flying solo. Had a great guest on with him. But, Keith, for the people who have never been to the QBC before, or for anybody, if they want to go, if this was their first time, if they've been going every year, just what goes into it? Obviously, I don't want you to pull the curtain back and reveal secrets, but it's an all year thing. Like, when you hit me up, or like, hey, I'm thinking about this guest, or we're thinking about this venue, or we're thinking about this, what exactly goes into planning the QBC on a yearly basis?
First, we have to find the venue. We've been lucky enough to have the 4 Points Sheraton in the last 2 years. They do a great job with us. Then making sure that you're available for the dates to host. then making sure we can get the players that are affordable so that way we don't have to jack up ticket prices and that are also interesting for fans too. Then I have to see if my team that I have such great, family and friends that help out every single year, they donate their time. Nobody gets paid. Everybody donates their time just because we want to see our fellow fans have a great time. The QBC is what I would want to see if I wasn't hosting it and doing it. Like my partner Dan and I, we just put our hearts and souls into it. And like I said, we're so lucky that we have you, Ibby now. We got Roger Clark, Mark Healy, Lori Rubinson. The Post did their podcast. Even Joe DeMeo, that I can't stand, did his podcast. SNY is great sponsors that we've had for a long time. I think it might have even been the second QBC that we started our partnership with them. And they keep bringing great stuff to the table. And we just want to make sure that everything's great. And that's like the biggest worry I have is that we get the good enough guests that people are going to want to come. Like we have a good reputation now, but we always want to make it a better time than the year before. We had a great time last year. I want this year to be great. And then when we do next year, I want it to be even better than this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is absolutely fantastic. And, you shouted out so many of the people. And, we got Christopher Harris saying Joe and Connor were great. Lori does great interviews. Saying Subway to Shea did great. Of course, Aunt Rivera was a new addition to the State of the Mets panel, along with Tim Ryder, who is returning. Tim Ryder's great. We're trying to get Tim Ryder back on the show. By the way, Ibby and I talked to him about joining the show in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have Tim on. I think Tim might have been our first guest ever. When we opened up to do guests.
I think he was. He was
right up there. Of course, Aunt Rivera, we're going to have back on. And there's just so much amazing stuff. Roger Clark, who's been on the show, John Minconi, who's been on this show, like, and that's the community, right? Like everybody that Keith mentioned, is either a part of our show, Ibby, because we know Keith and because of the QBC, or vice versa. There's this like amazing amount of synergy that happened, with the likes of John Minconi and stuff like that. So, that's what this is. And there's no, the thing for me that I always find amazing, Keith, is that there's no issues like with you having multiple Mets podcasts on, right? You get the New York Mets podcast, the New York Post Mets podcast comes on, and Jake Brown and Nelson Figueroa do a great job. There's no issues with Joe DeMeo and Connor Rogers. Like nobody's like, oh, I want to go in this spot or I want to do this. Everybody's just like, hey, we're gonna go out and do our thing, and it's gonna be great. And everybody gets to be, the beneficiary of it. Everybody who's there.
Yeah, my whole thing is that I wanted like I said, we put all that hard work in. I make basically no money off of it. You know that for a fact. That I don't do it for the money. I do it for just the fun of doing it and making sure everybody has a good time. And like even when we gave out the Gil Hodges Award to Joan Payson and her family there, they were so touched that we gave her that award that they've asked us to make a duplicate award so they can give it to another part of the family that wasn't there. They want to come back next year just to be supportive. And that kind of stuff is just makes like all the hard work and all the stress and everything worth it. So, and then I have like Chris Ferraro coming up to me and saying, thank you. And everybody just coming up and saying, thank you. And again, I couldn't do it without my wife, my sister, my other family, my QBC family. I don't have friends anymore. I have family members. And let me shout out Dan too, even though it's Dan.
Yeah, Dan's always running around behind. Dan is like the most behind the scenes, like full-fledged member of the QBC. I feel like he's always like non-assuming, running around, but then he's like wrangling, I should say, the guests and everything, and really doing a great job making sure that everybody is, like just happy and has water and is fed and is on time and like all the important things that you want to see at an event like that. Shay saying we need to know John and Ibby's backstage rider demands. Ibby's more of a diva than you think he is. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, completely.
compared to me, nobody's going to believe that, of course, right? The whole Hollywood John persona. No, so look, it was great. And the last thing I want to say, we're going to probably bounce back and forth and talk about the QBC a lot throughout the show, but I also don't want to spend all the time talking about the QBC at the beginning and ignore the hot stove and stuff. So we'll kind of bounce back and forth. But this is the last thing I want to say. Chris says, you guys were 3 for 3 with guests, meaning, of course, Billy Wagner, who I hope is going in the Hall of Fame, Cliff Floyd, who Ibby and I interviewed, and Terry Collins. And you know, Keith, I think for my involvement the last 3 years in the QBC and some of the other events, I think these are the 3 best guests pound for pound that you've ever had, like in terms of all of them being interesting, all of them being friendly, all of them sticking around. Like there was so much there. And it's not a knock on anybody who's ever been there before, but these 3 were just absolutely, I think, everything you would want in a guest.
Terry came for coffee at 8 a.m. Like when we were setting up. He came down and he was just hanging out with us. Then he came back later on, I think around maybe 11 or 12. Then he went out to lunch with a friend. Then he came back before his panel to hang out with everybody. He was having a blast, and it was just great to see him hanging out, you know, and enjoying it. And he couldn't believe that he never been to a QBC before, and that, you know, the organization doesn't do more with us.
Yeah, I said to Ibby, when we were talking to him for like 40 minutes about baseball at like 10:30 in the morning. And Ibby, like Terry Collins, I do not say this lightly. He might be the nicest person I have ever met.
He was fantastic. And just it's wild just being a diehard Mets fan like we all are, and then having Terry Collins just staying there like any other normal guy, and you're having a conversation. And obviously we all have 2015 in our hearts for what it could have been and the ride that it put us on. Just being able to stand there and have a half-hour-long conversation with him about the happenings of 2015 and talking about Yoenis Cespedes and the trade and things like that, and just hearing these stories. And he had nonstop stories. And the panel with Lori was fantastic. And like, I'm with John. Like, obviously, I've been following the QBC from afar, but being there and just hearing the stories from Billy Wagner and how he interacted, us being able to talk with Cliff Floyd, who was just as cool as I thought he would be. And then obviously the stories from Terry Collins, all of it. It was just an incredible experience all around.
It totally was. So you know what, Ibby, I'm going to let you pick the direction that this show goes in next, because I don't think that I can do it calmly in some ways. So there's some stuff we can talk about, right? We could talk about what the Mets have done, the moves that they have made, the moves that are still kind of waiting in the wings. And everybody thinks, you know, Yamamoto is going to take a little bit longer. And obviously there's this impending situation with Juan Soto that I don't really think, you know, I love Juan Soto. You know, I said I would trade anybody to get Juan Soto.
Of course.
But it doesn't really impact the Mets, because I've said that on this show, I also understand how trades work, and the Mets don't really have the kinds of players that San Diego would have wanted. So, you know, would I trade everybody? Yeah, I would trade everybody to get him, but I also understand it takes 2 to tango, and other teams have needs. And so he was never really a realistic possibility for the Mets to go out and trade for, but it looks like he's on the verge of going cross town to the Yankees. So where do you want to start? David Stearns overall, Rule 5 draft, the Mets kind of getting screwed a little bit in the way the MLB draft lottery works. There's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Let's start with, because I mean, there's a conversation I want to have, and I put it on the ticker. Well, I want to build up to it, and that's the patience versus panic and how to really balance the Mets offseason. I think it's an entire conversation I would love to get probably towards the second half once we go through all these things. But let's start with David Stearns at the moment, and let's talk about just for a couple minutes where the team has gone to this point, and try to I'll bounce my ideas off of you off of me, Keith, as well. What they've done to this point and how you view it.
Okay.
Let's do that.
You know what? Let me say this. There are people that have been acquired by David Stearns in the last week that I have never heard of. You know, I'm not plugged into the minor leagues. You know, I know a little bit about the Mets minor league system because I care, and because I do this show, and because I'm friends with Joe DeMeo, who we just found out Keith hates. No, we've known that. No, all jokes aside, Joe does a great job of covering the Mets minor leagues, but I don't claim to be Joe DeMeo, right? So, you know, and neither are you. You're probably a little bit better at it than I am. And so people have been acquired that I don't really know about from other teams. So because I don't know about them doesn't mean that I'm upset about it.
Right.
When I look and I say, hey, I think I asked Daniel Wexler, somebody they got, I was like, hey, tell me about this guy. And he told me about this guy. And I was like, oh, I understand. Now that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When a guy comes in and is given the keys to the city, the way that David Stearns was given the keys to the city, the way that we all wanted David Stearns to be given the keys to the city, and he like opened up the airlock on the spaceship and just jettisoned a bunch of pieces, right? He strips down the 40-man roster to 27 or 28, depending on who you talk to at the time, right? So he opens up all these holes, cutting bait with people, non-tendering contracts to people. And so when you do that, you are going to have to then replenish those spots. It doesn't mean as a 1-for-1. It doesn't mean that you are going to go out and in one offseason sign 12 free agents that are going to be starters on your major league team. You're going to get it. You're going to bring in guys at the Rule 5 draft. You're going to take those guys and flip them for other people. You're going to claim people off of waivers. You're going to say, you know what? This guy just came back from overseas. I'm going to grab him. I'm going to try to find a bargain here. I'm going to try to find, some creativity here. So this is exactly what I thought David Stearns was going to do, because this is what he did in Milwaukee. Now, he hasn't had the opportunity to spend the big money yet. We're going to find out how he spends the big money when we see what happens with Yamamoto and, to a lesser extent, Shohei Ohtani and some other people that are out there. But this is exactly what I expected. And if you didn't expect this from David Stearns, then you really didn't know who David Stearns was. You really didn't know why the Mets wanted David Stearns. You really didn't know what he was like. You didn't really understand this entire process. And that's not to put anybody down, but that's the reality of it. This is what David Stearns was always going to do. The writing was on the wall from day one. And then, like I said, a week later when he comes in and strips everything down to just the studs, you had to see this coming, right, Keith? I'll let you jump in on this first.
I'm kind of annoyed, like, at Mets fans, like expecting everything to be just big splashes and not realizing what the team really needs. The team needs depth. Last year, what happened? The team fell apart. They didn't have enough pitching. Mm-hmm. You don't need 5 awesome pitchers. You need inning eaters. You need people that can go the distance, that can, hey, you know what? Somebody's hurt. Let's bring in somebody from AAA that we have to replace him with. Guillorme, everybody was upset that he didn't get tendered. What did he do the last year? He trended down. His defense wasn't even that great. So you bring in somebody that has a better bat than Guillorme, and that could play as just as many, even more positions. So I'm all for giving Stearns a big chance. People keep asking me, what do you think about him? I'm like, I don't know. I have to wait until like maybe July to see how everything starts filling out. It's just too much. Everybody's like, I want. Let's just let it play out. Give the guy a chance. If he's the guy that makes the team better, he makes the team better. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'm not going to go crazy about it until we see more pieces, more of the bigger names come in, and what he could do with money trades and restocking the farm system.
Jump into the comments really quick. Chris Ferrara saying, amen, Keith. And that's what a lot of people are really, sharing that sentiment. Shay saying exactly. Let him sign people. We'll see how it pans out during spring training. Why worry right now? Ibby, I see a lot of nonsense online, and I know Mets Twitter, you're going to have people, trolling intentionally, but I see people on Twitter going like, oh, it's over. Oh, it's over. I'm like, it's December 6th, dude. December 6th. Like, nothing is over. No one signed. Nothing
has happened yet. And I'm bringing up Chris's comment here because it's on the money. Let's get mad when the names we want are actually off the board. The things that matter for this team are still very much available. And I don't want to talk about Juan Soto because that was never attainable because they never, and I've been talking about the last 2 weeks on the show. I've been saying that they just don't match up. There's nothing there. The Padres didn't have much leverage, but they were able to leverage the Yanks because of the potential of the Dodgers or the Blue Jays missing out on Shohei. They might jump back in. So they had to deal and give things away that they probably didn't want to in order to get him. The point is this. They were always going to take time. And what I mean by that is the players that are retained, I talked about this on episode 1 with you, John, when I said, I really felt that Steve Cohen should have stripped the team then and built from day one. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go flash, give you something on the field, and work behind the scenes. That's fine. But the problem that comes with that, because this is New York and not LA, where people are a little bit more, I guess, not as in tune, if you will, as a New York baseball fan. They kind of let things go and they won't question it. What happens is they expect that to be the norm. And when they're not getting that as the norm, they think that during a rebuild, what Keith just said, they think that they're going to get all these superstars. All right. Nothing is improper. Yes, I get that the names that we've gotten to this point are like, I have no idea. Like, I know Michael Tonkin was a pitcher for the Braves last year, but I'm like, I saw that alert. I'm like,
wasn't he the guy who hit Alonso on the hand?
Was it? I don't
he
even
was.
know.
I think he was the guy that hit Alonso, and somebody in the comments maybe can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure he was the guy who hit Alonso on the hand that knocked him out for, 4 weeks.
So, all right. So now at least I have an idea of who he is, but like I was like, I don't know who this guy is. A lot of them are minor, but when it comes to a bullpen specifically, which he is doing, thank you, Shay, which he is doing, understand this. A lot of bullpens are a lot of guys that you have no clue who they are, where they came from, what their story is. Sometimes we always talk about on the show, bullpens are fickle year to year. There are so few pitchers in this game that are relievers that are consistent on a year-to-year basis. Every year it's new people almost. So it's like, I don't care that, he's taking on these reclamation projects. He's trying to find arms that could fit. That's what you're supposed to do with the bullpen. Mm-hmm. I don't need him to be spending $80 million, $100 million on Josh Hader. If he was a finishing piece, sure, go for it. But that's not the case here. This team has a lot of holes. They were never going to spend that much money in terms of filling each and every one. They're going to spend still. And our main targets that we want are still out there. So I have no idea what maybe it's just the instant gratification that everybody wants. They see winter meetings and they want results and they want news and they want breaking and they want all these different things, and they're not getting it, so they're bitching and moaning about it. That could simply be it. But in terms of what he's done to this point, I have no problem with it because, again, he hasn't really missed out on anything.
Yeah, no, that's, you know what? There's some really great comments here that, everybody seems to be very much in agreement. And I thought people would, because we've all kind of, even sometimes when we disagree in this show with the commenters and stuff like that, like we all want the same thing. And we all, maybe we have a slightly different path of how to get there, but we all want the same thing. We all believe that the same thing needs to be accomplished a certain way, which is the way you described it, the way I described it, the way Keith described it. But here's a couple great comments. Shay saying some Met fans who were like, let him cook, are now complaining of food allergies, which is a great way to put that.
That's a good one.
Stevie Mack said, people need to realize also that not much is going to happen free agency wise until Ohtani and Yamamoto sign. That's another part of it. That's also why the Yankees are jumping out and getting Soto, because they probably checked in with Ohtani, were told absolutely not, or were given a dollar figure that they did not want to do. And they were like, all right, well, we'll pivot. We'll move immediately and we'll go in another direction. We have Pizza Sports guy saying Sturz deserves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the pen. That's always been a strength of his with Milwaukee. That's another great point. You know what? Let the guy take an opportunity to build out the bullpen. Like you said, bullpens are fickle. Jeff Cohen said it almost at the exact same time. And last time we did the show together, I commented about how, it seems like Tampa Bay rolls out these guys that are like creative players in MLB The Show. You've never heard of them. And they have one of the best bullpens every single year. That looks a lot like what David Stearns is trying to do right now. And that's to Carlos Ramos's point. He says, the names we have and they suck, so why is the problem with new names? Yeah. I agree with that for the bullpen and overall. I mean, Keith mentioned Guillorme. Look, I like Guillorme. I think Guillorme's a fun player and a good story, and I love that he caught the bat, and that was such a cool moment. Guillorme's not a good baseball player, like not in totality. There was a time 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where I said it. Guillorme is an important part on a winning team. He plays an important role. Keith also, you said it, Keith, he regressed. He's regressed since 3 years ago. So you know what? If him and Joey Wendell are a coin flip, give me Wendell, because at least he's as good defensively, like you said. He also plays more positions than Guillorme. He also made an all-star team. He also has more power. I know not a ton more, but I think he gives you something else. And Keith, sometimes, and I'm not saying this is how you build a major league team every time, but sometimes you have to make a change for change's sake, to Carlos's point, where you know the names we have and you don't like them, so why not bring in some new names? I think that's totally fine, especially when you're talking about a change in the entire, basically, executive branch, if you will, of the Mets.
Every now and then you just need to freshen up a team. I think sometimes players get too comfortable on a team that they're on. They got to go to another team to progress. It's kind of like with the WWE. They have mid-carders, and WWE only sees people as mid-carders, like Cody Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, Cody Rhodes isn't ever going to do anything. He's just a mid-carder. He asked for his release. He went to Japan. He did the independence. He busted his butt, started a company with AEW, and what is he now? He's a main eventer with WWE.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you have to go to another place and maybe refine yourself, and you could always find your way back, or you find yourself on a team that you're doing better at. But that's also with the Mets. They might be taking somebody else's cast off, and who knows? There might be a main eventer here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what? Chris making a good point. Got 30 people watching and only 3 likes. Hit the thumbs up button if you like what you're watching.
Since I got used to saying it while you were gone, John, make sure, hey, guys that are watching, if you're here, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us when it comes to growing and getting the video pushed out to more through the YouTube algorithm. You guys have been great the past 2 weeks. I don't want John thinking that he's the problem over there. So I don't want that to happen. All right. So make sure you are hitting the subscribe button, like the video. All right. You guys have been great. Let's keep it going. 31. We should have at least 31 likes. Let's go.
Carlos saying Keith wins today with the WWE comparison. Hand him the jackpot. And Ibby, that's what I look at when I see. Look, Carson saying Wendell sucks shit, but 1-year deals aren't possible to deeply hate.
There's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. There's not.
Correct.
There's not.
Exactly. That's the other part of it. You're talking about 1-year deal. You're talking about a small amount of money. And that's going to bring me to the other guy who the Mets were heavily involved with, didn't wind up getting. And the reason why I bring this up, even though he's not a big name, is the Eric Fetty thing. We all watched Eric Fetty with Washington.
Yes.
He wasn't good. Okay, but then you can't acknowledge that he wasn't good with Washington and then refuse to acknowledge that he won the MVP and the Cy Young in Korea not a month ago. You have to take the good with the bad. Otherwise, why are we comparing any of these guys? Like, why is Yamamoto going to make $300 million or $250 million for doing all of this in Japan? It counts, right? He still went and did it.
Right.
And these are the guys that you have to find. And I think a 2-year deal, $10 million, make the guy be your swing man. Maybe he's a spot starter. He fills that Trevor Williams role. I don't think anybody should get mad about that. But then you find out, hey, look, maybe Chicago upped their deal $5 million. Maybe they're going to give him a guaranteed spot in the rotation. Right. And if you're the Mets and you say, look, we're not prepared to do either one of those things. So I don't think you can get mad that they were in talks with him. And I don't think you can get mad that they chose to not meet the dollar amount, because the Eric Fettys of the world, the Joey Wendells of the world, there is a finite ceiling where you're like, okay, never mind.
Matter. Yeah, and shout out to Aunt Rivera, somebody Shea, who did a fantastic live on Monday with the guys over at Shea and Sons, Key and Keith, and they did a fantastic show. They went on for like 2.5 hours. I was with them the majority of the time. But when the Fetty news broke that the Mets and the White Sox were like the final two, that entire chat. And the guys themselves, and they'll admit it, they had like a mini meltdown, because I'm in the comments trying to calm them down. I'm like, guys, it's not that big of a deal. If he's a swing man, if he's a sixth guy, like, it's not that big of a deal. And I was like, look, you want to rag on the KBO in that sense because you saw this guy here and he stunk, but then he goes elsewhere. And then I was like, well, what about Merrill Kelly? Merrill Kelly left. He goes to the Korean League and he's fantastic, and then he comes back and now he's number 2 for the team that was just in the World Series for the Diamondbacks. He did he had a great year. I think he might have close to like 12, 13 wins, whatever it was. He had a fantastic year. So it's like, is Eric Fetty going to be that? I don't know, but I'm not going to rip the guy and say that he's a complete nobody. If we would have gotten him, fine. Do I think it would have been that big of a deal where it's like, oh my God, this guy's going to be our third starter? Like, no, that was never going to be the case. You have to keep on building because this team has no pitching. And I said it last month now. This team has done a horrible job when it comes to developing pitching and being able to pull from their own system. So they're always going out to try and find things. And that's going to continue to be the problem and the issue for this team until they actually start building from within. They're going to start doing it now with the pitching lab. But if they're going to try these reclamation projects, try different people, try out people in Japan, in Korea, whatever it may be, so be it. Like it's not that serious. There's no reason to lose your shit over it. There's not.
Before we head into the break, let's talk about the one kind of, if you could say big, it's a big name because of who he is, what he's done in his career, and where he's coming from, and that's Luis Severino. They give him the 1-year deal. Like Carson said, 1-year deals are impossible to get mad at, and it certainly is. It's the Prove It contract. It's the reclamation project. It's our pitching lab, Jeremy Hefner, whatever combination of those things can fix him. I think it makes a lot of sense. Keith, what do you think about the Luis Severino signing?
Low risk, high reward. I mean, what the Mets have nobody to really fill in spots. So you're paying somebody $13 million a year that had great numbers. Fine, he might not be. He might not have played a lot of games over the last couple of years because of injuries and stuff. But you still have somebody that can pitch, and if he stays healthy, it's a win. If he doesn't stay healthy, all right, who else are we going to go find? It's like one of those things where you don't. It's just stockpiling, and at least he's a proven pitcher in the past.
Yeah, and you know what? When you look at the fact, I understand it looks ugly, right? He had a 6.65 ERA last year, Ibby, but the stuff was not the problem.
Right.
And, we talked to some people at the QBC behind the scenes who know more than, quite frankly, the three of us know, and they said, there's no way this guy wasn't tipping pitches. You don't get rocked to the tune of a 6.65 ERA, throwing 98 miles an hour with cut and sink and dive and dart. Like, something was amiss. And if something's amiss, that means it's fixable. This is not a stuff issue. This is not a can't win in New York issue. Severino did plenty of winning when he first came up with the Yankees. He did plenty of good things for teams that were highly competitive. There were some people in this town that thought he was better than Jacob deGrom at the time, right? Like, I think that's a ridiculous comment, especially when you're comparing him to prime deGrom. But that was things that people said. So when you look at this, I mean, Keith nails it. Low risk, high reward. He's either going to be a guy who at the back end of your rotation eats up innings for you, or he's going to be a guy that if you're highly competitive could find himself as your 1A or maybe even your ace if you get him all the way back, because that's how good Severino can be. Yeah. And if your team's not good, guess what? Then you flip him at the deadline, you get a haul for him, and that's terrific. If your team's good, even better. You've got another person right there with you that you can, try to get to the playoffs with. So to me, the deal is an absolute no-brainer. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring up Pizza Sports Guy Rocco's comment right here. 1-year deals kept that 2025 payroll sheet clean. It feels like Stearns & Co. won't give much term unless they feel it's truly a strong fit. And that is important. I'll keep it there. That's important because that goes a long way. That goes hand in hand, in my opinion, when you're trying to build a sustainable franchise. Like you have to be careful with who it is that you're going to have around your squad, your team that you're building upon within a core for a long period of time. Otherwise, you end up doing what the Mets are doing right now, and that's paying a lot of guys to not be here because it didn't work out and you screwed up. So it's like you want to pay guys that are actually going to be in the building. But when it comes to Severino, 1-year deal, guy still has good stuff. I think a lot of people don't like looking at the underlying numbers when it comes to certain players. I think everyone, and it's hard to fault people that don't want to look at underlying stats and look at things and are tired when people bring them up. And they say, oh, well, I only look at, what's his ERA? What's his whip? The guy lost all these games. It's like, he's not good. He's throwing this. He's not throwing that. It's like, if you take the time to look at more things, same thing when it comes to guys in the bullpen, you get an idea as to why they're going after certain players. Luis Severino can pitch in New York. It was said by Stearns. And I think that goes a long way too. You want guys that know how to pitch in New York. That's why I think Jordan Montgomery is the target for this team. They want guys that can actually pitch in New York and can handle it. Will it work out? We'll see. And if it doesn't, guess what? It's 1 year. That's the whole thing. It's like he's not being brought in to be a savior. He's not being brought in to be a Cy Young. If he becomes that, fantastic. You deal with it after the season. If you want to keep moving forward, great. That's all well and good. 1 year deal. You see what happens, and then you go from there. There's nothing wrong with it. This team needs upside. He provides upside. What this team has, what this team doesn't have is it lacked upside, specifically on the back end of the pitching. Now you have something that might be able to actually reward you, as opposed to being happy when a pitcher gives you 4 innings because you're like, oh my God, this guy usually gets rocked in 2. So now you have someone that has a little more upside that can give you 6-7 innings potentially with good stuff, and is looking to obviously reestablish himself and get paid because he's still relatively young.
Look, I always, I've said it on this show with regards to pitchers. I've said it on this show with regards to hitters and position players. Give me the athletes. Give me the stuff. Now, I'm not one of those people who falls in love with the fact that a guy throws 100 miles an hour, and I'm going to let that be the thing that dictates everything about them forever and ever and ever. It's just something, and stuff doesn't necessarily mean I throw 101, right? You don't have to throw 101. Severino has great stuff. It's not because of the velocity. It's the velocity plus the movement. It's the pitchability. It's a lot of what he showed early in his career. And Carson says it. He's 29 years old, and he already has the 3rd best stuff out of the entire pitching staff at the moment. Like, you can't throw that back, especially when, Keith, to your point, like you said, you're building out a staff. The Mets don't have anyone. They have Senga and Quintana. Now, those are 2 good pitchers to have. I would say Senga is very good. I would say Quintana is he's a good Major League Baseball pitcher that you'd like to have in your rotation, but that ain't enough. It's not going to get it done. And I do love what Pizza Sports guy Rocco said about the long-term contracts or the lack thereof. The Mets, since Steve Cohen has taken over the team, have given 3 long-term contracts away. Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, and Edwin Diaz. And when you look at those 3 players, they all have a lot of things in common, Ibby, in terms of the type of player they are, the type of person they are, the type of growth that they've shown. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look at all 3 of those guys, and there's a common thread. That's why I look at it. I don't want to muddy the waters with Pete right now, but that's why I think Pete is a very high re-sign or extension candidate, because I think he fits into that mold. The other guys, you look at the dollar amount for Scherzer, sure. You look at the dollar amount for Verlander, yeah, but they're not here, and they weren't going to be here long-term anyway, not just because of age, but those contracts were going to come off the books regardless. So I don't think you can get bogged down in this, money, or big money versus, these guys must be scrubs because I've never heard of them. Look at the team. And look at the philosophy. And the philosophy is sound to me straight through, right?
To be fair, they did just sign a guy named Scrub.
That is true. They did sign a guy named Scrub, which Keith is, that's really asking for it. But maybe that's it. Maybe Stearns is the guy to really like change the narrative around the Mets being able to sign guys with names that are easy to make fun of.
No, he'll end up being the best player on the team.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's potential for that. Look, we're at 38 minutes, excuse me. We still have plenty more to talk to. Let's do the break right now, just so that we can get that out of the way. There's 30 people currently watching. Our high water mark was close to
only 15 likes. Only 15
likes.
Hit that
like button.
The thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up.
When I say we're taking a break, it is a 20-second spot that we just need for the audio version of this show, where we have to put in some ads. So the break here live is not super long. It is John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, our guest this week, Keith Blacknick, a.k.a. Media Goon, the man behind the scenes at the QBC. We have a lot more to talk about. We will be right back in 20 seconds. Yo, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter or X. But of course, watching us on YouTube is the best way to have your questions, your comments, your concerns, anything that you want to add to the chat come in real time. We can see it. We can react to it. you can also react to the stuff that we're talking about. And I think it is a great way to really take the conversation, especially here in the offseason, to kind of places that we may not have expected. But we understand that not everybody can watch live. You can't watch the entire episode live sometimes. And that's cool, because as soon as we're done with the broadcast, this will live forever over on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. Like Ibby said earlier, hit the like button while you're watching, but also subscribe to
Almost
the
at 500.
channel. Because we're almost at 500, which is not a ton compared to other people, but it's important to us. We love, exactly. We love what we're building here. We love talking to all you guys each and every single week. So the more subscribers, the more traction, the more views, the more accessible this becomes to other Met fans. So we appreciate you doing that. And of course, if you turn notifications on, you'll never miss the opportunity to catch us when we're going live. But like I mentioned a little bit ago, we understand that not everybody can even watch it at all some weeks. We got Patty in NYC, who is a great commenter, and she said earlier on Twitter, hey, I'm not going to be able to watch it this week, you guys. Well, you know what? Can't watch live, can't watch later. You can listen starting tomorrow, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. I got thrown off there because Carson threw in a Per The Athletic comment, and I got really concerned for a second that something incredible was about to happen or something terrible. We'll jump into that in a second. But like I said, your questions, your comments, your concerns, all that stuff come in real time, just like Chris Ferraro saying, Cy Young scrub.
If there's one thing,
absolutely wonderful.
If there's one thing I want to put out there before we even talk about anything else, because I was so excited. As sad as this is, I sent John a text before saying how, I had some free time during my break, and I made a graphic, and I was making a graphic that was based off of, the news that was coming in for our Rule 5 pick, which for some reason everyone was going crazy about us selecting a certain pitcher when it came to the Rule 5 draft. And I make this cool looking this graphic, which I'm going to bring up right now, because if it doesn't get shown, I'm going to be very upset, because I want to put it out there just so people can see the work that I put in. Like I do it, I got it comes in all nice. Got the text there. It's got the circle and thing. It looks pretty cool. And then 20 seconds or like a minute later, once I send John the text, I upload it to the StreamYard. Next thing I know, the guy's traded. So all of that was for nothing. It was for naught. But at least I know that I'm getting better when it comes to creating things, which makes me happy. But Justin Slayton, we hardly knew ye, and I look forward to your welcome back video of the city when you show up with the Red Sox.
Yeah, of course. Who's going to have the welcome? Who's going to have the thank you video first? Carlos Correa or Justin Slayton? Of course, this week we're not alone. We are joined by Media Goon himself, Keith Blacknick, the man behind the scenes over at the QBC. Or really, I say that a lot, Keith, but it really, there's so many people. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. It's the entire team. But when I think QBC, I think you. And, look, with good reason, because it was your brainchild to start, and it was 10 years ago. We just celebrated the 10th anniversary of the QBC. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger every year, and it really is a testament to the work that you put in, the work that Dan puts in. You mentioned your wife, you mentioned the entire team, and it's a labor of love. And when people ask me, what is the QBC? If they don't, I'm like, it's the Mets Fan Fest. The Mets don't have a fan fest. You have created the de facto Mets Fan Fest, and I think it is better than anything that the Mets could put on. And personally, I think the Mets should be more heavily involved. That's just me.
Yeah. So remember in 2020 when the Mets had their Fan Fest?
Yes.
I remember that, yes.
So when they had their Fan Fest, they asked us not to do the QBC after we already announced it. And then they brought us in, and this is during the Wilpon regime, and they go to us, hey, so can you not do your Fan Fest, and can you do us a favor and program a panel room all day for us? I was like, oh, that's interesting, but I prefer to do the QBC. But yeah, I'm like, all right, so how much are you going to pay us? Give us a budget for anything or what? Oh, no, we're not going to give you any money. I was like, I just got up and I walked out.
Wow. That does not surprise me.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, Chris Ferraro hit it right as I was about to say it. During the Wilpon regime, big surprise. Yeah, they didn't want to spend any money to do anything, and it's ridiculous. So hopefully now this is another way. We're going to get back into the hot stove conversation, specifically talking about Steve Cohen here in a second, but hopefully this is another way that the Steve Cohen ownership could really change the tide of what has been a long-standing, area of frustration for us New York Mets fans, right? Like of course, it's the players on the field. It's the willingness to spend money. It's the facility. It's the way to, not acknowledging the Mets past, like all the things that the Wilpons are known for. Steve Cohen has been systematically trying to uproot those things and change them. And Ibby, you made the comment before, it would have been great if, Steve Cohen came in year one and cleaned house. But I think having been a minority owner with the Wilpons and having been there, I think he realized that he kind of couldn't. He couldn't come in as the guy with more money than any owner in baseball. We're tearing this thing down completely. We're not spending any money. You'd be like, what the hell? We wanted something different. So I think he needed to kind of do what he did to get to this point. And look, it almost worked. We won 101 games. We were one of the best teams in the National League, and it sucked that we petered out in the playoffs early. But you know what? It almost worked. I mean, the recipe was there to try to go and buy that World Series.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a problem, and I'm not trying to put it across like it's a problem, but it's more so because of a certain section or a certain sector, if you will, of Mets fans, because they expect to always get the top end player because of his wallet, and they assume that they're going to get all of these things, even though a lot of them don't make sense. A lot of them are just not. Look, I don't care how rich you are, you don't want to spend that much money at every single position. Even the best teams don't do that. They position themselves well through their farm system. I talked about it at length the last 2 episodes, where you want to be able to churn out talent like a wheel. So it's like, even when you get rid of certain players, you can then just call up someone else, and then they become your lottery ticket, and then you can either use them and they're cheap money, or you can trade them off because you created space and then you spend money elsewhere. I think of the Dodgers and Mookie Betts. They have all these guys and they keep on churning them. But when you think about the Dodgers, right, you think about them so much. Everyone talks about them and their model and what they became over the last decade plus. Look at their prospects. A lot of the prospects that they've brought up, they've been okay. Some of them, a lot of them that they've shipped off have been better. But the whole idea is you want to be able to constantly keep moving without missing a beat. That's what this team is trying to do. That's why they're not trading prospects to get all of these rental players. Okay. Mentioned before, I think it was Carson's comment, talking about how they're not going to trade for 1-year rental players. So don't expect them to be on Tyler Glasnow's of the world, or the Corbin Burns, or the aforementioned Juan Sotos, who we weren't even a match for anyway. So if they're going to do things, it would be for people that have years on them. But again, that becomes tough because they're not going to try to give away what they just established at the trade deadline, which was spend a bunch of money to get a farm system, essentially. They weren't going to tear that away either. So it's a process. It takes time. And I understand being patient for some Mets fans is difficult because you've been waiting for so long, but you're on the right track. You have to breathe. I know it's easier said than done for some, but you just got to breathe and be patient.
This is a great comment. I'm not sure if Theo is a new commenter here, and if you are,
Theo's been here for a little bit.
Okay, I apologize if I missed in on that, but first time I'm seeing it, Theo. Welcome to the show either way. The fact that the Dodgers, who wanted Soto in the past, didn't trade for him tells you the Mets did the right thing. Dodgers easily could have topped any Yankees offer, and they knew to hold off. And I think that's an interesting way to put it. Again,
that could be an Ohtani thing too, though.
It could be an Ohtani thing.
That could be an Ohtani
I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, because I've said on this show that I would trade every and any prospect not named Francisco Alvarez to get Juan Soto, and then I would try to sign him immediately. That would be me if I was in charge, right? Like, that would be, because I don't think that you wait on a guy, because then you may never have the opportunity to get that person. If Soto officially goes to the Yankees, I think they're going to try to keep him. And now I don't know if they can. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. He wants a ton of money. He already turned down a $400 million extension. He has Scott Boras as an agent. The guy's going to free agency. And if the Mets and Steve Cohen want him and they can spend more money than anybody else, they might turn around and he might be in Queens next year. But I do think when it's time to get a guy, you try to get a guy when that person's available. You can't just say, oh, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, right, because that day may never come. But that said, that is a good show of restraint from Theo, from Theo's comments. And, you know, Ibby, I think a lot of what you're saying makes sense. And a lot of what Carson was mentioning from The Athletic, you don't want to tear down what you just built. No. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to, I hate to evoke this person's name, because I think it was kind of bullshit when he said it. But, Keith, Brody Van Wagenen once said, win now, win in the future. Now, when you're Brody Van Wagenen and you don't have any experience as a GM and you're answering to Jeff Wilpon, I think those are empty words. But when you're David Stearns and you're answering to Steve Cohen and you've seen what Steve Cohen is already willing to do, if David Stearns were to say that right now, we'd all be like, yeah, that's the plan. Win now, win in the future. It's be competitive every year for 30 years like the Yankees have been. That's what you're trying to do. And this is how you do it. We're watching it unfold in real time. And like Ibby said, it's hard to be patient for us Mets fans, and I understand that. I've been one. They haven't won anything in my life. But you need to be a little patient when an entire regime changes from ownership down. Because otherwise, what are you even doing? At this point, what are you even doing? Carson saying Brody Van Wagenen drafted Brett Beatty, so I'm not listening, John. That's fair. But Keith, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not going to be patient now, teams preach patience all the time, and they preach patience with a lot less to offer than here's Steve Cohen, richest owner in the sport, showing a huge willingness to spend. Here's David Stearns, the executive everybody wanted. Here's building the pitching lab. Here's building the analytics. Like, teams preach patience without having any of that to show. If you're not going to be patient now, there's no reason to ever be patient. Stop watching sports.
I think from being in the film business almost like 25 years, that whole mantra of hurry up and wait, I'm fine with waiting.
Yep.
Let's hurry up, get the pieces in play that will come up into the future while having a watchable team. They don't have to be game busters that they're going to win the world championship. Might get lucky, might have a fluke where they do, but for the most part, you want to make sure you have the pieces for the future. So I would say a win is drafting well, trading well, and then maybe in 2 years, you'll end up having a team that's going to have a run like the Braves. I hate saying it, but the Braves have been great for decades now. Mm-hmm. I remember when they sucked when they're in the West, but ever since they came to the eastern part of the MLB, they've been great. And that's because of their philosophy. They know what they're doing with the farm system. They know what they do with the trades. If they feel like they might have to overpay for a player, they're like, yeah, you know what? We got somebody waiting in the wings. We're good. Thanks.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to jump into the comments real quick. Lisa saying, hi, Ibby, John, Keith, and everyone. Just wanted to say hi to all. Have you on in the background listening to your great podcast. It was great seeing you all Saturday. It's a nice little tie-in. It's nice. It was a pleasure meeting you as well. And it's just nice to, especially again on the heels of the QBC, to get a nice shout out like that.
There is one that I did want to bring up a point as well. At some point, from Pizza Sports Guy, at some point you need to reset the payroll to get under the tax. Only way you can do that is with a strong farm. If a few hit, Mets may be able to have their pizza and eat it too. And that's true because, again, you want to have that cheap money. But the big thing with that comment, I'm going to bring it right back up, is the strong farm aspect. You can draft good players. You can have great picks. You can draft great players on paper, but you have to be able to develop them. Over the last 5 seasons, the New York Mets, and I've been talking about the downfall that player development has been for this team for a long time. Over the last 5 years, the New York Mets have had 5 different people running player development. That's a problem.
That's not good.
That is a huge problem. They finally, Andy Green is going to be taking that over moving forward, but you have to find that stability, and you can't keep changing things and think that you're going to find that success. It's part of the expression, too many cooks in the kitchen. You're having one thought process here, then you bring in another one, then another one, then another one, and everything keeps on changing, and nothing is staying the same. And a lot of the people are just staying in house, so it's like you're hearing one thing and being taught one thing one way, and then somebody else comes in, they're leading a different way, and then someone else, and then everything becomes disconjointed. And you see it when you watch these players come up. Look, is that partially a problem when it comes to us being told nonstop last year that Ron Mariso couldn't play defense? Yeah, it's not that great, but it showed that he can hit better than what they were saying. Francisco Alvarez, I was told that the guy was a butcher behind the plate. I thought he was pretty good. It's just getting the right eyes and the right minds in the proper spots, and I'm willing to bet that David Stearns can do that in better helping this team find that stability. But yeah, 5 people running player development over the last 5 years, not good.
It's akin to if people are watching and right now or listening tomorrow, whatever. If you're also a football fan, it's changing the offensive coordinator every year. That's what it is. You're changing the offensive coordinator every year, and with a young quarterback, you can't get away with that. Now, maybe if you have an all-time great quarterback, you can get away with that, but I would venture to say that even with a halfway decent veteran quarterback, changing the coordinator every year is problematic. Or changing the philosophy. It doesn't even have to be every year. I don't want to turn this into a football conversation, but look how much Josh Allen has regressed since Brian Daboll left and became the coach of the New York Giants. You see a precipitous drop-off. And that's just what happens. I do want to mention Carlos. I was saying something earlier. He said, John, when I said this in the past, you killed me for it, bro. Just saying. I do want to say that Carlos and I go back and forth a lot. And I think that honestly, truly, I think Carlos and I have the same idea. I think Carlos and I have different ways of communicating that thought process and also different ways. It's almost like it's a semantics argument where it becomes I'm saying it this way and he's saying it this way. And then we turn into a disagreement when we're actually saying the same thing, or we want the same end goal and just the process is a little tweaked along the way. And the segue that I'll use when I say that is, I don't think the Mets are going to sign Shohei Ohtani. I don't think the Mets should sign Shohei Ohtani. I don't think that he is a great investment at his age for what he would be asked to do. But Keith, if the Mets signed Shohei Ohtani, and let's just say they signed Ohtani tomorrow, and they also signed Yamamoto, I'm not going to be angry about that because it's not my money. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, this guy who's great now plays for the Mets, especially when you're not really mortgaging the future because you're not giving up anything to get Shohei Ohtani except money, the likes of which the owner has in spades. So if he wakes up tomorrow, kind of like he did with Correa, if the market for Ohtani's still out there in January and one day Steve Cohen wakes up and goes, make him an offer, I'm not going to be mad. So like I can acknowledge that both things can be true. Do I think it's a prudent way to go about things? No. Would I do it? No. Is he great though? Yeah. Would I love to see him on the Mets? Sure. So if the guy wants to spend the money, let him spend it. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. But my question is with Ohtani, if he needs the surgery on his arm, the Tommy John surgery, does he ever pitch again? Or is he just going to be a DH? Is he what
he says he wants to?
So what's the
yeah? And the guy who did the surgery said he's going to be ready by 2025, no doubt, to pitch. The
so are you sure? Like, it's like one of those things. Are you paying for a DH or are you paying for a two-way player right now? But then again, if he's playing for the Mets and he's hitting home runs, that's the power that you have, and then you're protecting Alonso, and you might have that formula for a team that's going to do well for a few years. If they sign them, they sign them. If they don't, they don't. I'm so blah right now until I see the team actually playing well and like gelling, and I'm not worried about it. It's not my biggest stress was this weekend. I am not stressing again until next December.
Yeah, that's fair. Pizza Sports guy saying maybe he had a little sit down with Ohtani on that Japan trip. He being Steve Cohen. Long flight for only one meal. I agree. And Ibby, I think that's the perfect segue into the conversation that we found out today about Steve Cohen, the fact that he took the initiative and flew out to Japan to meet with Yoshinobu Yamamoto and his family and, just take that extra effort. We want to talk about being the antithesis of the Wilpons. Well, yeah, get on your private jet, fly around the world to meet and have dinner with a guy who's not even on your team. That is, I don't know if Yamamoto is going to sign here. He might want to play on the West Coast. He might want to play somewhere else. But it is very clear to me that the Mets are doing everything in their power to secure the 25-year-old ace from Japan. And that's what they should be doing. And so that's going to be enough for me. Look, I want him to be here. I don't want him to go somewhere else. But if he goes somewhere else, it's not because the Mets got outbid. Let's put it that way.
Right. And if there's one thing we can say, it's that Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz all had dinner at one point or another with Steve Cohen, all three got signed. If dinner was had between Steve Cohen and Yamamoto, maybe he can go 4 for 4. Look, putting out a full court press like that, and Stearns put it so lightly in his presser before, when everyone is trying this giant free agent pursuit that none of us have ever really seen before. And I talked about it with Michael Marino last week, saying how it's insane to me how $200+ million is being talked about for a guy that is yet to throw a pitch in Major League Baseball. And then his counter was, I think it might be inching closer towards $300 million. And then the report comes out today of people saying that it might inch closer towards $300 million. And it's insane to me. But just knowing that we have an owner that understands that sometimes investments of that magnitude make sense. And for this team on the trajectory that they're on, or trying to be on, I should say, a 25-year-old is worth that risk. Now, do I think he's really going to get $300 million? I still have a very hard time seeing that. I love Jerry Blevins when he was on with Joe last night. Is Jerry right where he thinks that this guy who hasn't thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball is going to break Garrett Cole's record number for a contract? Like, I have a hard time seeing that. But if it happens, it could very well be coming from Steve Cohen's pocket, because if anyone can do it, he can, and not really have to fear the repercussions like other owners would. So that could be the leg up for the Mets. But the one thing is this: unless it's an egregious overpay to really make him come here, because if he doesn't take it, then it looks bad on the player's part in general. If he doesn't come here, it's not because the Mets didn't really go all out and try. It could just be money was similar and he went to a better situation, whether that is with the Yankees because he sees that they're getting Soto, whether that's with the Dodgers because they missed out on Ohtani, whether it's going wherever. It's not going to be for lack of trying, and Mets fans should always be excited because they're always going to be in the hunt.
I agree with that. And I want to bring up these comments to just continue to clarify my stance on Ohtani and what I was saying earlier. Carson says, if Ohtani was 25 like Yamamoto, I wouldn't have the two-way player concern of investment that Keith brought up earlier. Because look, if he pitches for 5 years and then doesn't pitch for the next 5 years of, let's say, a 10-year contract or whatever, you're still maximizing value. But him at 30 with now 2 Tommy John surgeries, yeah, I understand that there's a risk involved. And Carlos saying, I can't believe I agree with Carson on Ohtani. And yeah, that's the thing. Look, it is a tricky situation with the likes of an Ohtani, because when I look at Ohtani, it's not the slam dunk of give me the 25-year-old ace who does one thing, even though he's doing it in Japan, even though he's never been here in the States pitching in Major League Baseball. There's an easily transferable skill set and asset allocation. When you look at Ohtani, to Keith's point, to Carlos and Carson's point, you don't really know what you're buying, especially after 2 Tommy John surgeries, because most guys, after the first one, they come back better. After the second one, they don't come back as good. Do you want to pay Ohtani? Let's say it's not even 600. Let's say it's 450 because his value takes a hit. Do you want to pay Ohtani 450 at 30 years old to just be a DH, or to be a DH and go back to the outfield because he can't pitch, or to be a DH and sometimes a relief pitcher because he can't do, what a starter does? Yeah, again, I agree. I think that is, something that is hard to swallow if you're looking at it from an asset allocation standpoint. But again, when your owner's rich, I don't really care. If he wants to go do it, let him go do it. As far as Yamamoto goes, I'm not saying it's Yamamoto or bust, because I think the Mets can be creative if not for Yamamoto. But Yamamoto is the perfect free agent at the perfect time for this team, where they are today, where they're trying to be next week, next month, next year. And I think they absolutely need to do whatever it takes, Ibby, even if it is an overpay. I think they need to.
I think no matter what, and I said this last week as well with some of the people in the chat. I go, you have to understand something when it comes to the Mets right now. The only thing that this team truly has to offer is money, and that's not me trying to rag on my team that much, but that's the truth. It's like they're going to have to egregiously overpay in certain situations for certain types of players, because that's that's their main thing that they have going for them right now. They haven't established the sustainability. They haven't established the notion that they are a top flight team in terms of consistency with the playoffs and things of that nature. So you're going to have to overpay. How much? We'll see, because it seems like this is going to be basically a game of chicken about who's going to stop first when it comes to spending overall. But no matter what, the Mets are going to have to overpay, in my opinion. And I don't mind that, because it is a 25-year-old pitcher. And shout out to Michael Marino as well, who put out a tweet earlier talking about what Yamamoto brings to the table in terms of his stuff and how everything is plus, especially when it comes to spin rate, and how, a majority of his pitches are viewed by Major League scouts as elite. So 25 years old, you don't see that on the market ever when it comes to a pitcher. Maybe I shouldn't be, or maybe we shouldn't be as shocked when it comes to these total numbers, because, again, we're used to Garrett Cole hitting the market at 29 and being a star, and he got paid at that age. This guy's 4 years younger, 5 years younger. Like, it's unheard of. We've seen hitters. We're going to see Soto hit at 26. We saw Machado. We saw Harper.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. We've yet to see a top flight arm at the age of 25 be available and how teams would react. And in a game that is desperate for pitching, where even though pitching gets hurt as often as it does, you always need it and you want the upside. The price that keeps on going higher and higher. I'm just overall excited as a baseball fan in general, not just a Mets fan, to see exactly what this number hits.
Yeah, and Keith, I have to be honest and be transparent. I think it was on this show. It may have been Ibby, one of the collaborations we did that was like kind of technically our show and somebody else's show. I was like, man, if this Yamamoto thing gets up to like $250-300 million, I don't know if I would do it. I don't know. Like I said that like just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And I was wrong, because I didn't think the number was going to get that high. And now that it is getting that high, and now that it is potentially, right? We only hear what we only know what we're hearing out there. But now that it is potentially getting that high, and some of the dominoes have started to fall, and you see where some of the markets are, I'm now firmly in the camp of I was wrong. You got to pay whatever money you need to acquire this guy, within reason. I'm not saying if somebody offers him 300, you offer him 400 or something like that.
Right.
But if there's a $250 million offer and you got to go to 275, if you're Steve Cohen, you got to go to 275. If you're flying to the other side of the world and meeting with the family and taking Stearns with you and doing all this stuff, you have to. Like, I know this sounds crazy to all of us regular people, but you can't let $25 million be the reason why he's not a Met.
Well, it's kind of like if you're going to buy tickets off of StubHub, and you can get good seats for $100, and you can get even better seats for $125. What's $25? You're already spending $100. I know it sounds horrible. What's another $25 at that point? So
it's true. I'm
doing it more as a layman's terms than a billionaire terms. But what's the extra $25 in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, that's true. Those are two great analogies from Keith. The first one was the Cody Rhodes mid-Carter in WWE, and this one to put it in the terms of us regular folks. Because look, to be honest. And I have some hard opinions on billionaires when we're not talking about sports, but save that for a different podcast or whatever. But we don't know what this money is, but we all know what it's like to buy $100 tickets. And Keith's right. If you could get in the ballpark for $100, or you can sit first row behind home plate for $125, you're going to do the extra. And if you've already committed to going to the game, in this case, if you're Cohen and you've already committed that Yamamoto is your top target, and you're willing to talk and you're willing to deal in whatever the high market value is going to be, you can't let yourself get priced out for this extra little bit. And Carson brings it up. We'll probably have to save, Alonso for next week, but it's true. Yeah. Kind of like Alonso. If you're willing to do 8 years, what's 10 years? And it's true. I don't want to turn this into an Alonso conversation, but again, when you're talking about keeping a guy and it's just money, just keep him. And you're Cohen, just keep him. Like, this is not going to, we're not the A's, we're not the Rays, we're not Baltimore or the Guardians or whatever. This is not going to screw up our team. One deal of significant length is not going to be the thing that, like, oh my God, now the Mets can't compete in 5 years. That's not going to happen.
No, and I feel that after hearing Stern's talk today, when he was asked questions on Yamamoto and talking about, is this, in so few words, is this Yamamoto or bust, which is what everyone often likes to coin as a phrase here on YouTube and Twitter as well. Hearing him speak on it, it really makes me wonder if they feel as though that they're not going to allow it to not be them based off of their money offer. Like the way he spoke to him made me really feel that no matter what, they're going to put the high offer out there. If he takes it, depending on what the difference is with the next person is going to be all dependent. Because again, let's not forget, there's also the money off of the top. So if you're giving him 250, it's really 290 because that money off the top, based off the percentages, has to go to Japan. So no matter what, this could go over 300 based off of the money that goes to Japan as well. So I'm at a point where I have a hard time where this team and the moves that they're making specifically to this point, I have a hard time seeing this team not land him, go all out, spend whatever the number is to get him in-house because he fits this overall plan moving forward because he's 25 years old. If he was 28, 29, 30, different story. Okay, 25 years old, it fits too much. And if you get this, I think that in itself, and I might have to backtrack on this because it's Mets fans, would satisfy the fan base, would satisfy this, because it's like, think of it this way. If you don't get them, then everyone's going to be harping on every single move that you do moving forward and feeling as though that you fell short because you didn't get Yamamoto. But if you get Yamamoto, it almost feels like the rest is gravy. Like the rest is all great because you got the crown jewel that everyone was after. Now, I say that because I think I could speak for myself, for you as well, John, and for you, Keith, where that would be fantastic because you get it. You understand when we were talking about before when it comes to patience and panic. But I think a lot of people might not, and they might say they want more. You have to go all in. If you're getting him, you have to keep on going. But for me, I think that they're at a point where they are going to pay the number, whatever it is. They will land him, and the rest of the chips will fall where they may with how they're going to construct this team, and specifically this rotation. But I really do feel that an all-out pursuit is going to be there for our Mets, and they will end up landing him. What that number is going to be, like I said, is going to be very, very interesting because it's going to be very high.
Well, you just used the phrase all in, and I think what people need to understand about Yamamoto is acquiring him because of his age is not an all-in move. You're not acquiring a rental. You're not acquiring an old player. Now, I've said this at the end of last year. I've said it all offseason. I'm going to continue to say it. I think the Mets are going to be good this season. How good? I don't know. I think they're going to be plenty competitive because I think Stearns and Cohen are committed to building a competitive roster. What does competitive mean? Does it mean 83 wins? I have no idea, but I think they're going to put themselves in a position to be as good as possible, to try to win as much as they can and try to make the playoffs as a wild card or whatever the case may be. And then you let the chips fall. You let the team start to play. You see what you need. You see what you have, all of that stuff. But I think they're in a position right now that Yamamoto needs to be. I would rather overpay to get Yamamoto, Keith, than pivot to the next guy. Like, I would rather give Yamamoto $25 million more than the next offer to secure him than to have to pivot from Yamamoto to Jordan Montgomery. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want to go and give Jordan Montgomery a 6-year contract when I can get a 25-year-old potential ace for, like, I know you'll be spending more on Yamamoto's contract, but I think you're going to get more value out of that deal than you would for Jordan Montgomery, who I like, but I don't want to play. I don't want to be in the Montgomery ballpark for 6-7 years if it goes that high.
I think they should try to spend Steve Cohen's money. I'm not giving him money. I don't have that kind of money to give him.
Right.
But Steve Cohen should give him that money because you're going to need somebody solid. Now, the only problem I could see is the adjustment time coming from Japan with the different size ball, the different grip of the ball, and having to learn how to adjust to being an American pitcher versus a Japanese pitcher. Remember, Senga had a little tough time at the beginning too, adjusting. And I just don't want the fans, because you know how patient they are, crapping all over him right away. I think it's going to take a little bit and people have to realize that. And I think in the future, from what we've seen with him over in Japan, he is going to be an ace. And if he's not an ace, he's going to be a high number 2. And the Mets need that because they don't have that in their farm system that's right there, ready to go.
It's funny because one of the things I keep seeing and hearing is what Keith just brought up, which is, people have mentioned in the comments earlier, Ibby, the prospect of a 6-man rotation, the learning curve, if you will, for Yamamoto. I think, look, Yamamoto's going to get paid by somebody, and he's going to go because of the contract, even if it had never happened, but even if the Tampa Bay Rays paid him and he goes to a place with no pressure, he's still going to have pressure because of the contract. So
Correct.
When you factor in contract plus city, whether it's Yankees, Mets, whether it's the Dodgers, whether it's the Giants, there's going to be the contract pressure and there's going to be the city pressure. But the Mets have a very, very, very recent example of being able to deal with this because they have Kodai Senga. Not only is Senga a countryman, not only did Senga just make the very successful leap over to the States, but he just did it and the team just went through it and the fan base just went through it. So I know the Yankees have had success and also the lack of success with bringing pitchers over from Japan, right? For every Tanaka, there was the Keiagawas and the Hideki Arabus of the world, RIP. But, but the Mets have an example right in front of you. Like, if you're Yamamoto, you're getting the pressure no matter what because of the contract, regardless of which city you go to. I think the one other thing the Mets can sell is, we have Senga, look how well it worked out, and you're younger and you're better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's that access to what else we can do for you. And I think that's a factor. Maybe I do.
Sorry, I dropped for a second. What'd you say? What was that last part one more time?
I said a lot.
No, just the last part. Just the last part.
No, I think the Mets having Senga and the success that Senga has, and the success that the Mets had with Senga. You said the only thing they could sell him on is the money. But I think they can sell him on no matter where you go, there's going to be pressure.
No, of course, yeah.
Look what we, and by we, I mean the team and Senga were able to accomplish. We know how to deal with this. We know how to ease you in. Our fans also have the expectation of a guy just came over and was successful after, having this adjustment period. And I think our fans will be a little bit more gracious, knowing that there's an adjustment period.
Yeah. The comfortability factor is definitely there because of saying, I agree. And I should have said that before as well. The main point I was just trying to get across was again, the overall situation, because you hear things and we don't know what we don't know the wants or the desires of Yamamoto. Like, we hear things when it came to Shohei, was like, I want to be in a place that's going to win. I want to win now. Like, I have this window. Obviously I want to get paid, but I want to be able to win. So that's why you looked at someone like the Mets when it came to someone like Shohei. You're like, we're not in the right spot right now to really be ahead in that derby, if you will. But with Yamamoto, it might end up being just money. But again, the fact that you just brought up the comfortability factor, and we had it with Senga, and you showed that you know how to handle it. Yes, that could definitely play a factor. And look, Senga's been upfront saying that he wants him on the team and he'd be willing to do it. And obviously Yamamoto also said that he has no issues with the culture aspect, if you will, of not being the senior based off of Japanese culture in comparison to usually not teaming up together when going places. But yeah, it's going to be, I'm telling you, I don't know about you, but I just feel that it's been an incredible thing to watch, even though the sweepstakes, if you will, of the winter meetings have been very stale and boring and slow, specifically for our Mets, but in general. But just reading more about this guy, he really is becoming like the most interesting man in the world. Like, you see new things every day, and it's like this guy, I'm sorry, like, he hasn't thrown a goddamn pitch, and he's going to get probably $300 million. It's insane to me. It is nuts.
Carlos Ramos saying, you're right, John. We handled Senga's transition perfectly.
It was.
Subway to Shea saying, agreed, John. The Senga transition factor is huge.
Now, but here's the one thing, ready? Is it going to be an issue when you have Senga? Like, is Senga properly accustomed now to being on a 5, like we're going to go 6. Like, is there going to be an issue when you have 2 of the same almost in a rotation? Or if the conversation went well between Senga and Stearns, like you said he was going to have with him earlier in the offseason, if he was going to be proper with a normal 5 days rest as opposed to having that extra rest here and there, is that going to be an issue when you're trying to break in someone else as well?
Chris Ferraro, I didn't know this, but apparently Stearns was asked if Senga went on the trip, and he would not comment whether or not he did, which I think is an interesting factor. Look, we got to get out of here in a second, but the conversation is rolling and stuff keeps coming in, and I think this is a good way to end it. I know, first of all, I think it's a first-time commenter, but before I pull it up, I know that there's other ways we can close this out in terms of like what we think the Mets are going to do and what we would do if we were in the shoes. Like I made a comment, I think on Twitter a couple days ago, where I think the Mets should do a little bit of a repeat of what we saw when they went out and they signed big money for Max Scherzer. They made a trade that nobody expected with Bassett, and then they go and they sign Taijuan Walker, and all of a sudden it's like boom, boom, boom. You rebuild your rotation on the fly. So I think, Yamamoto is the ace type, the one that you throw the big contract at. I'd like to see the Mets go and get a guy that you don't expect, a la Chris Bassett. Now, this year, I think it's going to be the kind of player that maybe has a year or two more of control rather than the rental. But, I want to see that kind of creativity put in rebuilding the rotation on the fly, because I think that's going to be the most effective way. But this is the comment I wanted to bring up, and we can talk about this and kind of end on it. Keith, come to you first. I think it's Rosie, could be Rozzy K, saying, I think that the Mets are punting the season if they don't get Yamamoto. They're not interested in spending at the top of the pitching market if they don't get him. Now, I don't agree with one portion of this. I don't think that the Mets are going to punt, because I don't think that Steve Cohen has it in him to be a let's rebuild, let's give up a year kind of thing. I don't think that's his mentality. I also think the Mets have too many win now players on the roster. Punting would mean then trade Pete Alonso, which I don't think they're going to do. Punting would mean giving up a year of Diaz and Nimmo and Lindor's prime and all that stuff. I don't think the Mets are too good to punt a season. But if the Mets don't get Yamamoto, I do think that they should pivot. Like, I'm not sure that, again, they want to spend 6 years to get Montgomery or 7 years to get Snell. Like, I don't know if that's a good investment. I think then you have to cobble it together short-term deals. I would go out and, get Seth Lugo on a 2-year deal or something like more of a stopgap situation, not punt the season, not like, we're just going to call up Christian Scott and Blake Tidwell and just go for it. But I think that they need to kind of re-examine it, because I don't think some of these other guys on the long term are where the Mets want to be. So I think it's a good comment from Rosie or Rozzy.
I don't think they're going to punt, but I can see them maybe overpaying for like a year or two of a player or a pitcher instead of going for a long term.
Yes.
If you do that, you figure out like Snell, we'll just say, like, I'm making up numbers. They're going to be lower. Say that on the market, he's really $5 million a year pitcher, and then you pay him $8 million for the year. You think he's going to turn that down if he's going to get that kind of money just for a year, and then he can go somewhere else, or maybe have a team option for a second year? There's ways to make things work. I don't think they're going to punt, but I don't think they're going to go all in for a multi-year contracts on pitchers that it's going to hamstring them later on for like 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm sort of getting at. And Ant Rivera saying this. I tweeted with Joe DeMeo, and he says if they don't sign Yamamoto, that they should not sign any multi-year pitchers. And I would call a 2-year deal in the case of a pitcher the same as a 1-year deal for a starter. But go for like Lugo and Flaherty and Giolito, and that's. I think, Ibby, that might be the way. If Yamamoto decides he wants to play here in LA, play for the Dodgers, and no amount of money is going to make a difference, and that's what he decides, I think I'm more into this idea of, and these are just
based
3 random names, but let's just say Lugo, Flaherty, Giolito, than going all in and paying more money for somebody that doesn't necessarily – look, I'm pro players getting money. Everybody who watches the show knows that. So when I say they don't deserve it, I don't mean it like as a person. Everybody deserves whatever you can get. But as far as the spending goes, yeah, I don't think that I want to live in that world where you're giving like Eduardo Rodriguez more money than he necessarily is worth.
Yeah, I have a hard time with how this team is trying to build, and the way I'm picturing it. Like I've been saying, Yamamoto makes sense from an age perspective. I don't see this team, if they don't get him, being willing to go out there and give $110 million to Jordan Montgomery. I don't. I just and that's coming from someone that through the show, through the shorts that I put out. Like, I really like Jordan Montgomery. I think he fits here. I think he'd be a great get, but it's dependent on other factors. Him coming in here and having to act as the pseudo 1-2, if you will, with Senga, like, I don't know if I like that as much. And that's why I don't think that they would spend that money. So yeah, I do kind of fall in line with the idea that if they don't get Yamamoto, I don't think you're going to see the higher, or not higher, but like the middle tier of pitcher. They might go towards the back end of that middle tier to the next tier below to fill out, and then go for it again next year and go after a Corbin Burns type in that sense. Because I don't think it would be smart financially, and we all know he has all the money in the world. But I just, from a team building perspective, I don't know if giving that type of cash as the top flight pitcher that you're going to get for this offseason in say Jordan Montgomery, I don't think it makes that much sense. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't get Yamamoto, if they pivot completely and go with the names like Ant said that Joe mentioned, whether it's the Giolito types, the Lugos, or the Flahertys.
And the thing I want to say to that is, Met fans, just be prepared for Mets Twitter, trolls, talking heads on the TV, people on the radio. What?
I said, just follow us. Follow
right.
Ant. Follow people that actually have a little bit of a thought process.
Be prepared for this to happen. If the Mets don't sign Yamamoto because he decides he wants to play somewhere else, and they take this route of a more conservative approach and a shorter term to build the rotation, be prepared for the people I just mentioned, trolls, social media, radio, TV, especially if the Yankees get Soto, hear that the old Mets are back. The Wilpons are back.
Yep.
Steve Cohen is unserious. Steve Cohen sold us all a bill of goods. Be prepared to hear all that. But understand that the process is sound. Understand that we're having this conversation right now, and remember this moment that we're all agreeing, like, yeah, that would work, actually. That would work. It would make sense to sign Jack Flaherty and see if he can bounce back, who, by the way, I think is a huge bounce back candidate. But look at some of these things and understand that it makes sense from a team building perspective. And like Keith said, hurry up and wait, have the extra patience, and try to just dig your heels in and eliminate all the noise. Because to take this conversation full circle, in the first half, we talked about Eric Fedde and how Eric Fedde made sense on a 2-year, $10 million deal. But if you have to guarantee him a rotation spot and you have to give him an extra $5 million, he doesn't really make sense. Well, Jordan Montgomery's a great pitcher. But if you got to pay him $110 million or $120 million or $130 million because the market gets outrageous, I don't think he makes sense anymore. Jordan Montgomery makes a lot of sense at $75 million, 4 years, 5 years, sure. 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, no. Give me Lucas Giolito on a 2-year deal. I know Carlos hates Seth Lugo. I've heard some other people say, no, absolutely not Seth Lugo. I understand where the vitriol comes from. Give me Seth Lugo on a 1-year deal before I'm signing Eduardo Rodriguez to a 6-year deal. That's what I'm looking at. And there's going to be some shit that gets stirred up if that's the direction we go, Keith. We've been Met fans a long time. You know that that's where it's going to go. But
especially based off the moves that have been made to this point.
But you got to block out the noise.
Right.
You got to block out the noise. Because also understand that Wilpon doesn't own this team anymore. Steve Cohen does. And what happens if Giolito bounces back? What happens if Jack Flaherty bounces back and Severino becomes an ace? What happens if the Mets are in the playoffs contention? You know they're going to go out and make moves at the deadline, and they're going to acquire pieces. So, Keith, you just have to look at this with the clear perspective, and it is going to be hard. And that's why, if nothing else for vibes, they got to sign Yamamoto just to wash that away and to make that a non-factor.
I mean, even if they grab Seth Lugo for 2 years, you can have him a year as a starter and another year as a long reliever, like he used to be.
Mhm.
If that doesn't work out, you need the pitching depth anyway. Throw some guys into the bullpen. You're gonna need, pitchers are gonna break down. So get as many pitchers as you can with Yamamoto if you have to. It's fine. The Mets. I think if the Mets lose out on Yamamoto, there'll be a big trade. There'll be something that will even it out.
I that's the one that Carson mentioned it. I don't want to scroll all the way back up through the comments, but Carson had said that a bunch of times. Pivot to the trade market, go trade and get somebody who either has control or is going to be around, or somebody that you think you can extend, whatever the case may be. Sign one, trade one, trade for a number one and then try to sign a number three if you miss out on Yamamoto. I think all of those things, Ibby, become possible. Look, we have to get out of here. Because we're at an hour and a half, but I do want to shout out everybody who's in the comments right now. We have 54 people watching.
Only 20 likes.
Only 20 likes. So hit those thumbs up.
Come on, please. Thumbs up.
Come on. I'm on the show. And I liked it in the comments.
Thank you, Keith.
The video, sub the channel.
Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the show.
We only gained 2 new subs. Let's gain some more. Come on, more. Come on,
53 people, 55 people, whatever it was. The high water mark today is a great number for us. We appreciate everybody in the comments. Yes. Keith, I'm going to give you the last word. You can take it wherever you want to go with regards to the Mets, their offseason, the QBC, wherever you want to go. Your final thoughts before we get out of here.
I want to thank everybody that came to the QBC, the vendors, the hosts, the players, the crowd, everybody that came, everybody was positive. That's what's the best thing about the QBC. It's the reset for the year from the last season. If it was a great last season, we'd be having a celebration like the Mets won the World Series. It was a crappy last season. We're like, all right, we're just going to celebrate with the team's history. We're going to celebrate being Mets fans, and we're going to celebrate hanging out together. It's a cool hang. I want to thank everybody for that. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me on again. And I just want to say, hopefully next QBC, we're having a more positive thoughts on the season that just passed.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. I know we talked about it kind of intercut, spend a lot of time at the beginning, about 20 minutes talking about the QBC, but we talk about it because it's important. It's not just because Keith does a great job, Keith and everybody over there. It's not just because Keith is our friend. It's because QBC is fantastic. I would say that if I wasn't involved, if I just went as a fan, it's terrific. It's so much fun. And Aunt Rivera saying it, it was a great event. Congrats on 10 years, Keith. Yes, 10 years of the QBC. Next year will be year number 11. Ibby, what's your final thoughts? What do you got?
Final thoughts. I'll hit on the QBC real quick. It was an incredible time. So thankful. And just to echo everything that Keith just said, it was one of the most positive experiences I've been able to be a part of. And I was just going as a fan. I was going as a fan. And, I'm very thankful to you, John, for asking me, like an hour prior, hey, you want to go on stage with me to go talk to Cliff Floyd? I'm like, yeah, I've been wanting to get that guy on the show. It's someone I've always wanted to have a conversation with. And the fact
working on it, by the way, working on it.
The fact that I was able to ask some questions that I had always wanted to ask Cliff Floyd, because I was always a big fan of it, especially when he was on the Mets, was incredible and cool guy. The event itself, meeting everybody, talking with everyone, people in the comments, still very weird to me when I see people. They're like, oh, I listened to your show. Like, it's still a little weird to me, but like, I appreciate it so much, and was able to have a lot of cool conversations and meet a lot of cool people. So I'm thankful for that. Thankful for you, Keith, for the 10 years that you've been doing this, and hopefully you do it for another 10 as well. And the success continues. In terms of our Mets, stove is cold. We're waiting. We're anxious. We're curious. Once that first domino falls, we're going to get a true idea of what this offseason is going to be for our team. I'm excited to see what that domino is. Anxious, sure. But at the same time, I'm patient. And I hope that the more people that I get to speak with and talk to on Mets Twitter and through this channel and through the comments or wherever it may be, I hope that I can help calm your nerves, because I think you're going to be okay, Mets fans. You just, again, you got to be a little bit patient.
Another one I couldn't have said better myself. Look, we never announce stuff on this show until things are official, but I do mean what I said in reaction to what Ibby was saying. Working on it. trying to see if we can get Cliff Floyd on the show. It was great talking to Cliff. We talked to him for just about an hour at the QBC. It was amazing. And a lot of it was about his career and his time with the Mets, but he has so much great insight to offer, does a great job on TV. And so would love to get his take, a little bit more of his take, which we didn't focus on our Mets now as they're currently constituted and where they're going. So hopefully at some point this offseason, we can do that. And Christopher was saying, I want Terry Collins on this show.
That'd be
that
great.
Would be incredible. Another one that I'm trying. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the offseason. I am trying because it was great talking. We didn't interview him formally. Of course, Lori did a great job at the QBC with that.
Oh, it was fantastic.
And she always does great. She's an absolutely wonderful interviewer. And it was terrific. But we talked, Ibby and I did talk to Terry Collins for about 40 minutes, just talking baseball, talking Mets, talking asses and jackpots, so much stuff. And so we'll see. We'll see if we can get him on. My final thought, just as a celebration of baseball, I said it at the very beginning of the show in the open. Chris Russo's a moron. I cannot believe what Chris Russo said today. Chris Russo, if you haven't seen it, go to, I think it's Awful Announcing is the Twitter account. And you can see like anytime somebody does something stupid, they post it. Go to Awful Announcing, watch the video. Stephen A. Smith, who I'm not a huge fan of, is looking, he has like a 100-mile stare the whole time Chris Russo is talking. Chris Russo has stepped into that Skip Bayless. Like Skip Bayless never wants to give LeBron James any credit. You could say Jordan's better than LeBron. That's fine. Skip Bayless never wants to give LeBron any credit. And Chris Russo never wants to give Shohei Ohtani any credit. He's not as good as Babe Ruth, even though Babe Ruth's been dead for like 140 years or whatever. Doesn't matter. That's all he wants to say. He made some really obnoxious remarks about him as a person, as a player. I think he made a comment likening something to the secrets of the atomic bomb. And if you don't know why that is insensitive for a Japanese-born baseball player, read a history book. It has nothing to do with sports. Chris Russo's he's a moron. He is an absolute moron, and he needs to go away. Take all your money and crawl back into a cave and root for Barry Bonds or whatever the hell you do and play tennis, you annoying bastard. Sorry. I just can't. I don't understand how do these people get paid money to do this? Anyway, that's it. That's my sports says just subbed and liked the pod. Thank you. Thank you for indulging us for over an hour. I feel like these episodes are going to be longer this offseason because there's going to be so much more to talk to and talk about. But we couldn't do without you. Everybody in the comments, thanks for watching. Thanks for talking. Thanks for liking. Hit the thumbs up on the way out.
Sub the channel.
Subscribe to the channel. Yes. All that stuff. If you missed any of it, as soon as we're done in a couple minutes, you can head on over and watch the entire thing on our YouTube channel, which is called Till Mets Do Us Part. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at Till Mets Do Us Part. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen to this show every week. It drops on every single podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. It'll drop tomorrow morning, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, and our guest this week, Media Goon himself, the man behind the curtain at the Queens Baseball Convention, the one and only Keith Blacknick. We will see you all next week. Peace.